right, well, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we've got some new features of the M-Trust system, right?
Yes.
Do you need this to move? Are we going this way?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm just going to take a few minutes of your time to just demo the new features. Last week we rolled out.
Show them here.
Slide back this way.
I'd rather stand for it.
Okay.
Is this going to be in 3D? It's coming.
So last week we rolled out our first phase of this new release for phase 3. And it's the largest, probably the most complicated rollout of this phase 3 project because there was a lot of data conversion involved. Most of you don't know or have ever experienced Pension Plus. Some of you have. I think, Jeff, maybe you have in the past, Scott and Carrie. Pension Plus was designed and utilized an individual, could be out there multiple times. A person could have, based upon however many roles they had with Teachers Retirement System, that person could be listed out there. And as you can see, I have up on the screen this nice training tool that Darla developed for us, and I've got it expanded. There's a little more information at the bottom, but Pension Plus, you could be listed out there multiple times in the system if you were a member, a beneficiary, an alt payee. We could have separate addresses for those roles. Whereas now with this new rollout that we implemented, a person is a person, and a person is created in M-Trust based upon their role. So for example, a member. That member is created through our online wage and contribution reporting system 90% plus time of the time. Very rarely do we create set up a member. Now the district, the employers are responsible for actually creating and adding those accounts in the Teachers Retirement System. So that's one role. But a person could also be created in the M-Trust as a beneficiary. That beneficiary could ultimately become a survivor. They could ultimately become a joint annuitant. There also could become an alt payee. An alt payee, if that person doesn't already exist in the system, can be created by setting up and creating an alt payee, and Denise handles most of those. So the one nice thing out of the system, and I'll show you once I show you M-Trust, each person that is created based upon their role in how they relate to the Teachers Retirement System, they're assigned a unique 7-digit ID number. And that is a step towards us getting away from using Social Security numbers as an identifier for all of our members in the system. So each person now has a unique 7-digit number that wasn't assigned in the past. And they can have, like I said, multiple roles within the system, and that person can then ultimately become a benefit recipient with us.
Are you planning on converting everybody to that?
Everyone has been converted. That was part of this rollout. It was a major rollout. It took us months and months to actually do the data verification, and then ultimately last Thursday, after lunch, we went live with that new rollout. So Wednesday, the system was down for external users as well as us internally here at staff, as well as Thursday part of the day, and then we opened it back up. External users could get onto the wage and contribution reporting system, back to doing insurance reporting, my TRS. So that was all turned back on after lunch and once we went live with the new features. So you will see once I demo this, the stuff that's in the purple box here are the new functions that we rolled out in M-Trust. So the person button, you would never use this button to actually set up an individual. A person, like I said, is created by their role. So if we'll use it going forward, and we're trying to encourage staff to use the person button to actually search and view and look up any individual that they need to see. One thing I'll tell you, like in Pension Plus, which I've been around and seen Pension Plus, I was here before we ever went live with Pension Plus. And the one thing, you could go and search like for someone that was a beneficiary or an alt payee and never know how, based upon how Pension Plus was designed, who that person was associated with. Now you see that individual's role and what members they're associated with. So the 4 boxes in the purple are the new functions that we have, and again, like I said, a person is created by their role, so you're using it to look up. The address button that we have out here now, kind of explained in the past, so even when we went live with M-Trust to begin with, We got existing functionality, so like I said, in Pension Plus, you could have multiple addresses based upon their role, and so we had an address button under membership, we had an address button under retired payroll, you had an address for an alt payee, so you had multiple places you were maintaining addresses, which could be not in sync, basically. So now we have one single address, so a person can only have a single address. A person can only have single contact information, meaning we have their work phone, their email address, their fax, cell phones, whatever. And then the beneficiary is also a new function as well. And again, we had beneficiaries listed under membership, we had beneficiaries listed under retired payroll. Now we have one central location to see that information.
Question.
Yes, sir.
On the address part of it, what if you have an individual that has a primary address, but also spends half the year in a secondary address?
They have to notify us, and we have a means of actually simply flipping back and forth easily
So
between.
you can keep track of that?
Yes, absolutely. They have to notify us in writing of address changes.
Sure.
So for snowbirds, absolutely, they tell us, when they're leaving and when they're returning back. And now it's easy to flip back and forth between a summer address and a winter address.
Tammy, do they have to do that on a continuous basis, or
Yes.
can they?
Yes, they do. Yeah, we require it in writing, absolutely.
Each time they make the change?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so now what I want to do is actually show you the new functions. So this is mTrust, and here are the new functions up at the top. Like I said before, we used to have some of those functions listed under membership as well as under retired payroll. But now they're listed across the top. It's static. To give you an example of what I mean by that, and this, some of us have a lot of menu items on the left, and if I decide to go into something else, it brings up that new screen, but these items stay static and remain up at the top to where I can flip back and forth. And so that's helpful for like retired payroll. Their menu item is extremely long. They can flip back and forth between address and contact information. So, but what I want to show you, so now with that unique 7-digit ID, and I think before in the past, I'm not sure if I demoed or you've seen this in the past, but we can do a find. We were able to do partial SSNs, we could do a full SSN, or you could do a lookup and search on partial name, a combination of a lot of different things. Well, now that we have this unique 7-digit ID number, I can search on that.
Have the social security numbers been removed from the records?
No, they have not. We still have to have that information for, filing 1099s.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so back to the security issue. I actually was on a plane back from Boston with a guy that was creating algorithms for mutual fund companies, and he told me that they can create systems that could go through 7 digits is, 100 million.
Yeah.
But they could go through an algorithm where they could install those numbers very rapidly to try and pull records. So would there be a notification process if somebody was starting to do that would let us know that there was a high volume of requests that would notify us quickly, or?
That's the functionality of monitoring data transaction is one of the things that we are looking at the database layer. And really what it means is that looking for anomalies at the data layer is taking a look at what kind of transactions the database does on a regular basis and having some type of a notification when there's transactions outside of the norm. We don't currently have that in place, and that's some of that enhanced monitoring that we're looking at that Denise spoke to earlier. Is that something that I have tasked to do, and I've already spoken with our databases are hosted by ITSD here at the state. The ability to have the system monitor exists. Oracle database is extremely robust enterprise level database engine. We need to implement it, and really the question is knowing what to implement and what to watch for. And I think that it's something that we would like to implement sooner than later.
Well, for example, what to watch for, I mean, if you were able to get notification that the number of daily average inquiries has all of a sudden spiked dramatically, that would certainly be indicative of some kind of a hacking effort.
It is, so keep in mind that we are currently going through development. We have been, since I've been here, we have been for the last 5 years, development, and some of those transactions we would expect to see on a regular basis as our developers hit our databases doing validation, like with the data conversion recently. I think that there's a pieces. One is identifying what needs to be watched, what we should watch, identifying what's normal traffic, watch it for a while, establish a baseline, and then implement a policy at the database layer to say anything that exceeds these thresholds we need to know about. And I think those are things we'd like to put in place. We'd like to see that at our server level. I have tasks for myself set up to have our servers set up for unusual traffic. That would be at the front end interface, the mTrust server itself. But looking for large transactions at the database layer, I think, is a good feature also. Because what we want to do is we want to find anomalies and understand what's going on so that we can be very proactive in looking for unusual behavior. And it is, we definitely have all those items on a to-do list moving forward for our security awareness.
Well, thank you. That was a very satisfying answer.
And for security purposes, I will tell you this is fictitious data you were looking at. This is not a real individual.
I assume so since she changed her middle name.
Yeah, we've changed everything on this account.
So going real quick, back to Dan's question. On the front end, you know, the only way that anyone ever gets access to this, if you're an employer or an employee, is you have to know a username and a password.
Okay.
So it's not
So it's not as simple as putting in the numbers.
just guessing social security
Right.
I
numbers.
gotcha.
They don't have
Have
a
to be
means to
in.
access our system that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, as I was saying before, now a person is a single person in the teacher's retirement system, and they can have multiple roles in TRS. And this tells you exactly what Lisa Connor has with TRS. She's a member, she is a rehired member, and that's her current status. She's also an alt payee, and she's a monthly recipient as an alt payee for this member, Tim. And as well as she's also a beneficiary, a joint annuitant for Tim as well. What is really nice is that these are live links that I can flip back and forth between individuals. But what I want is, so she has her own address, she has her own contact information, and she also has beneficiary information. So yeah, as you can see, all of it, she has Tim as her primary active beneficiary. And again, I can use this link and flip back and forth. Now I'm looking at Tim's account. If I want to go back to Lisa, here's the roles Tim has, and you can see he has a warning on his account that he has an alt payee on file. He's also our member as well. But he has Lisa listed as his active primary beneficiary. If I want to go back to Lisa, this is so nice. I mean, we can flip back and forth in between members. You can see all the roles that they, like I said, Pension Plus, you could not see a beneficiary if they weren't a member, who they were related to, or tied to, I should say, or if they were an alt payee, who are they an alt payee for? You would search and you would not be able to see if you did not then take and do further research and case search and find out who is that individual an alt payee for. So it is really nice. I think it's a huge improvement. I know Roy has said to me, I wish we would have done that to begin with, but of course, you know, what we were trying to get was existing functionality from transition over to the web environment, and this is a much needed improvement. But it was the largest rollout for us of this phase, the most complicated. Going forward, I think it'll make our further rollouts a lot easier because everything is tied to this. It had to happen first, and so it was a complicated process. Configuration management was an issue, and just because of that process. But yeah, and we had to unfortunately shut it down during the week, but we made wise use of that time by taking that whole day and actually training staff again, doing just like some refresher. There were a group of 5 individuals that hadn't had an actual hands-on experience with the new functions. So we did that, so the entire day was spent training. So it wasn't a down day at all, really. And we prepped, the individuals in the office prepped by, taking and printing off information, to work on other things in the office, but, just handling phone calls. We did have read-only access to staging during the time we were down, which was an exact copy of production, so really it was, the only inconvenience was to our external users as far as wages and contribution reporting, but at that point in time we had satisfied the fiscal year end, so there should be very limited folks using wages and contributions. Insurance was shut down already just because we had ran payroll, and there's that time frame that the employers are already aware of, so it was my TRS and just maybe some of those wage and contribution users that were out there trying to be proactive and do their, July report early or something like that, so.
Well, these changes here are what I see as really exciting about the process that we're going through right now. Because in a typical rollout scenario, somebody already thinks they understand what you need and they just give it to you.
Yeah.
And in this scenario, Roy and Alfred and whatever have worked with us long enough to understand now what we're about and what we're like, and they gave us what we wanted the first time, but
Yeah.
They're looking out for us a little bit, and that's what's exciting here.
Yeah.
'Cause this really is.
It's really, really nice, really, really nice. And I think once you get used to using it and paying attention who's on this blue bar, then you realize that's the individual that you're working with. You can bounce back and forth. If you go to retired payroll, it keeps track of, you could go into other menu items and you don't lose that, of who you were originally working on. You can change and look at multiple things, and it makes it very nice to work with.
Tammy, under benefit tables at the bottom,
Yes.
is that where they can go in and project what their retirement would be?
No, that's, yeah. Sorry, we have an issue with our projector wanting to cut off on us, but that's actually for us internally.
Okay.
That's the actual tables for calculation behind the scenes.
Okay.
Yeah. My TRS is actually an external, web system that we can access as staff, but that's not where they do their benefit.
If I log on, my screen looks a little different. This is probably more what the employees here see
Right.
versus what a teacher would see to
I see,
log on.
I see.
Yeah,
And that
so-
would be true also of the buyout tables, right?
Yeah, so those tables that you just saw the link to, those are the actual factors. So they're just a
Okay.
big table with factors in them.
Yeah, and that's behind the scenes, the system's using that to set up, calculate benefits, but I'll show you if this comes back on. We have a link to access my TRS, and that's just for us as staff, but.
So you guys could see what we were seeing.
Yeah,
if
we
were
could actually,
talking
you could
to
be on the phone and we can go out and basically look and duplicate and see what you're seeing,
Right.
yeah.
That is a great plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So I apologize, we've been having issues with this. We do have a link under membership, so here's membership. The link is access my TRS, active members, and then I could put in a social security number and actually look at a person's account out there. So, and I can change members, I can look at stuff, but it's a different view than what you see as a member of Teachers Retirement
Go ahead
System.
and put her, because you can get her social security number from the organization.
Yeah, I have it right here. But, I'm a little hesitant to, I'm not quite sure what all he cleaned up, so.
But for us or any other member, active or retired, they still just put in their username, their password, doesn't matter what their number is,
Mhm.
all their stuff comes
Is
up.
that right? Yeah. So this is everything that I can see on Lisa Connor. I can do this, where you were asking, Dan is my benefit estimator, that's where they would go and out and actually generate an estimate for
It's
themselves.
really handy.
Oh, it's,
And
yeah.
you still require a written document to change a beneficiary, correct?
Yes, we do. Yep, absolutely.
Is that state law or is that just good practice?
Most entities are gonna require a written document or an electronically signed document to change beneficiaries. We require notarization as
Yeah.
well.
So, like if I demoed, we have a link under my beneficiaries that the individual could actually, click on that link, takes them to the form, print it off. They have to mail it in
That's
to us.
right.
Yeah. Okay. That was just my 15-minute little demo of the new features.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks, Tammy.
Jim, Karen's is here to help us with our strategic plan, our long-range planning, not strategic, well, it's probably strategic as well. Strategic planning, long range.
I think I know most of you. Nice to meet those of you.
Yeah, Jim.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. talked by email before, so it's nice to meet you in person.
He's the one who makes you fill out the surveys.
Yeah. So today we're gonna kind of do an abbreviated strategic planning, and we've got just a bit of time, so we're gonna get right to it. Kind of the Cliff Notes version of the Read Your Digest strategic planning. So if you look at your agenda, objectives, agenda, and background, I just want to kind of refresh there. We're going to probably jump right into just setting some goals and objectives, but I kind of want to set the stage and the context, just get us in the right mindset and kind of bring you two kind of up to speed with what we've done in the past. So I've got a couple extra copies of it. You're good. I've got a couple other handouts here, and I think everything else we're going to use is in the packet. So today, kind of what we want to do is just make sure you have the information you need to make good decisions, big picture decisions in the interest of the system. We want to kind of keep our strategic plan up to date, refresh it a little bit. We'll take some time and kind of just briefly look at our mission, guiding principles, then we'll get into the goals and objectives. We want to kind of document our current strategic goals and evaluate and prioritize our objectives for the coming 2 years. And I want to spend a little time about just continuing to integrate our strategic plan into our work culture. We've done a really good job on the front end of doing the strategic planning. It's translated into people's performance appraisals. And I just want to talk maybe a little bit about some strategies for reinforcing that, just kind of recognizing and rewarding the achievement of objectives. And I think that'll be one more step to kind of further ingrain it in our culture. And TRS has done an excellent job with strategic planning as far as having a plan that's actually getting completed. You'll see a lot of organizations that'll spend $40,000 in strategic planning, come up with a nice 40-page, 4-color glossy plan that sits on the shelf and nothing gets done. And what TRS has done is really come up with a practical framework and set goals, and it's been getting done. So it's really been a great process. So we'll kind of go through, like I said, set the stage a little bit. We'll report out on some of the goals and objectives. We'll see where we take a lunch break. I'm not sure if we're going to get quite as far as I anticipated with the 4 steps in the beginning. And then what we want to do is kind of finalize our objectives. We've done a lot of work ahead of time, Sean, Tammy, and I, as far as kind of building some proposed objectives and seeing how those fit together, and then just spend a little bit of time talking about how, as a board, we want to communicate that. And some of the big initiatives we're going to be talking about, like the possible, move of workspace and stuff. I think there needs to be a solid communication plan behind that for members and everything. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So that's kind of our plan. I gave you the background. I kind of previewed a few of the things we'll be talking about today as far as some proposed objectives. I apologize for bombarding you with paper, but I do have another handout and a few more here coming. So I'll send these around. And the first thing I want to do is just kind of briefly set the stage for our planning discussion today. And just talk a little bit about maybe effective strategic planning, board responsibilities, kind of how it all fits in. I ran the green ones once. Thank you. So one of the things I do, that extra, with board, when I'm asked to do training for public boards is, I know the governor gives you a packet when you're appointed and everything, but board members really don't have a formal job description. So typically when I'm asked to do training for state boards, we do a little, so you guys are laughing over there, I got it.
Oh, it was funny how you said that. You made a packet, and that's about it. You're on
the way. Sorry, too flippant, but we really don't have a job description for a board member. So a lot of times when I do training for public boards, we'll spend some time kind of talking about the top 10 responsibilities of board members. So I excerpted a piece from that training and relevant board responsibilities, which actually kind of where I came up with this top 10 idea was Board Source. They do a lot of work for nonprofit boards, so I adapted the top 10 responsibilities of nonprofit boards to kind of make sense for public boards. Because there are certain things that a public board doesn't have to do that a nonprofit board would do, like fundraising and stuff like that. So the first four I put there, as far as determining the organization's mission and purpose and advocating for them, even though the legislature defines their statutory role, within that, the board has the ability to really define our mission. And this board has done that, and the mission really, a statutory authorization doesn't mean an effective mission statement. Effective mission statement's gotta be something that's kind of short and quick and meaningful and inspires and motivates people. So TRS has done that. The board ensures the mission is clearly stated and enthusiastically supported, including periodically reviewing the statement, which we'll do today, and then coming up with objectives and policies to carry out that mission. One of the other top 10 responsibilities of a board is to ensure effective organizational planning. Pretty straightforward how that relates to what we're doing today, and even some of the information we use today I think can be used to inform other documents. As far as the executive planning process, information we submit to the governor's office, there's goals and objectives. We put our goals and objectives out on the website. The TRS website looks great as far as articulating the mission, goals, objectives. I mean, it's really nice. We've come along, I think you guys have come a long way with getting that information out there. It looks really good. Determine, monitor, and strengthen programs and services. So you can see when we look at the history, how this planning effort's been really important to TRS as far as making sure we're strong, solid. I mean, some of the things you've done with like M-Trust, implementing GASB, staff planning and development has just been really solid, and this board's done a really good job of focusing on important things, which I'll talk about later. And then enhancing the organization's public interest. I really think the strategic planning goals and objectives should provide good talking points for you as board members in dealing with constituents, legislators, should set the stage for dealing with the legislative session, which I think our agenda this time is for people just to leave us alone and not, but I think if people know, legislators know you're doing a good job and the system's sound, it's good to have those goals at your fingertips and good to be able to report that at your fingertips. And as board members, we want all the board members to kind of be singing from the same sheet of music, and so I think that the documents we come up with today will be great tools for you to enhance the organization's public image. Some of the other responsibilities of boards, I just didn't get into detail, but I put them down there. Selecting the executive is probably one of the most important things a board does. Supporting the executive and reviewing their performance. As you all know, recently going through the performance appraisal process, a lot of the objectives on the performance appraisal are going to come directly out of the strategic planning process. So this is really important for that. And then it kind of flows to the other staff too. I mean, as far as Sean coming up with objectives for Nolan, John, those folks, I mean, they're going to be tied to the strategic objectives. And then, some of the other things, I mean, just hearing today's discussion, ensuring financial adequate resources, protecting assets, and providing financial oversight. I mean, just some of the questions you were asking today about the integrity of the system and are we set up to, detect tax and stuff. I mean, those are all spot on with board member responsibilities and those types of questions. So that's kind of where today fits. And I just want to take a little bit of time and take a look at our current mission. If you flip to page 2 of that green handout. And again, look at our mission, our vision, and our guiding principles. And kind of after we take a second to look at these, I'll kind of refresh everybody on how we came up with this and where we got to where we are. But from my understanding and from discussions with like Sean and Tammy, I mean, I think these are still pretty solid. And I don't know that we have a need to adjust or enhance anything there, but I just wanted to give the board a chance to take a look at it and just check off the fact that we are periodically reviewing and updating this, which we've done. So you can see where the mission really takes, this much MCA and boils it down into a nice little kind of concise statement as to what we do. Our vision statement really articulates, where we want to be, what our vision is for the future, and then our guiding principles are the things that not only we use to communicate who we are and how we operate, but they're also used to inspire our employees. to kind of guide our work, to help guide decision-making, those types of things. So what does everybody think about the mission, vision, guiding principles? Are we in good shape? Does anybody have any questions or see a need to discuss?
I just have a comment about the mission statement. You know, it's very obvious that we're very different than many other states that have a direct input into the asset allocation of their own funds. So when it says maintaining the stability of the fund, we have limited capacity to do that.
Right.
Only in terms of how our actuarial predeterminations meet up with the actual results of something we can't control.
Right.
So I don't, other than saying that, I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, and I'm
Well,
sure.
I think we have more role than that, so.
Do we?
Yeah, we can advocate for benefit enhancements or reductions, or contribution enhancements or reductions. I mean, those are two other big pieces of
Okay.
the stability of the fund.
Yeah,
And what
that's
has
a good
caused
point.
problems in the past, you know, or different things like that, just knowing that, that's how I see it instead of, but I
Okay.
do see where you're
Yeah,
coming
I
from.
do too, yeah,
And
you're
and
right.
we have input on all the assumptions associated with, you know, that development of the actuarial.
In what way? Because of our member that is on the Board of Investments?
No, because of our participation with our actuary in developing what our demographics should look like, what our
Right, so-
membership is a part of, what our interest rate.
So this coming spring, what we'll do is we'll go through what's called an experience study. The actuary will come in and they'll compare our actual experience to what we thought was gonna happen and over the last 5 years. And then based on that, he'll make recommendations, and the board has to either adopt those recommendations or adopt different recommendations for changes to actuarial assumptions. So like the rate of return assumption, even though you're correct, we don't set the allocation, the TRS board doesn't, that's all done by the Board of Investments.
Right.
Kind of one of the big pieces of that is what are we expecting to make in return, and right now it's 7.75%, so that drives their decisions about allocation to some degree, for sure.
Okay. So
And we have control of that.
to clarify then the relationship, that in this case, that we have with Jeff, with his position now in the Board of Investments, as a board, do we have a directive to give him our perspective on what we think is appropriate feedback to the Board of Investments?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that is why there is a delegated member from this board on that board.
Yes, certainly part of it. I mean, so TRS assets are, you know, probably, they're not quite half, it's about 40% of their total assets they manage over there. So, I mean, we should have a fair say in what happens at the Board of Investments.
Okay.
And part of that experience study too will be discussions amongst all of you as board members about the recommendations we get from the actuary. You know,
And
for all the
it
assumptions.
just provides another layer where if they have questions of why we made decisions that we made, there's somebody sitting in the room that was a part of that. That might be able to help in addition to the fact that Sean's usually there.
Good, thanks.
And certainly the part that the board does have control over, you know, as far as the benefits paid out and you know, system design, plan design, GABAs, all those types of things. I mean, I think it's important for members to understand that part of your mission. It's like, well, why can't I retire after, you know, 15 years with a 10% GABA each year? Well, it's like, well, we have to, you know, maintain the financial stability of the fund.
Sure.
So that helps communicate that to folks as well.
I like the way you think.
That wouldn't last long.
Yeah,
Yeah, we should get there soon.
Yeah, I'll be a board member.
yeah.
So, just quickly on page 3, I want to kind of walk us through our strategic planning history. And really just to kind of set the stage for today. Again, we're going through this really quick. So, but there's been a lot of work behind where we're at. You know, we're kind of in strategic plan maintenance mode today. So we kind of started in January of 2009, really invited stakeholders. MPAIR was there, Sam and me and MT, in addition to the board. We did a real comprehensive SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and I'll give us a chance to kind of take a quick look at that and a refreshed version of that today. We defined the mission statement, guiding principles, and established goals and objectives. So there were kind of 3 huge goals that came out of there: communication, member-employer participation, plan design. Obviously with legislation and a session looming, that was a big deal. And then organizational development's really been on TRS's radar from the get-go. And that organizational development piece, I think, is huge, because we really started to reap the benefits of that long-term goal as far as strengthening, enhancing TRS. So kind of during that interim period, 2010 to 2013, the staffing board were really implementing those goals. And we had the 3 big goals, and under the 3 big goals, we had 7 or 8 different objectives. So the board staff were really working on implementing those. Some really big accomplishments during that time. I mean, too numerous to list here, but we developed and implemented our outreach program, communication officer, developed and evaluated plan design alternatives. That was kind of a big deal during that time. Got a new executive director, developed staffing plans. So a lot of major things happened in regard to carrying out those goals. Then we met again in August of 2014. Again, the board was here, staff was here, partners, I think the IM was there, to refresh the SWOT analysis, review the mission and guiding principles, conduct a visioning session, and that's where we developed the current vision statement that we just looked at. The board really spent some time rolling up their sleeves and parsing that over, and established updated goals and objectives. So again, during the interim, that set the stage. The staff and board have been implementing these things. Really had some amazing achievements. We had the GASB requirements, disaster recovery and business resumption plan, some of the plan to improve workplace efficiency, some of the stuff we'll be talking about today. Major information systems development we just saw today with Tammy's demonstration, and even just the continuation of some of the communication objectives. Like on the website, the map that shows how much money goes into each county and community. Some of that stuff's just fabulous as far as communicating the impact of TRS and how important this is to the economy and economic development. I think a lot of that good work that Sean and the staff have done were kind of at least agreed upon with the board, or born out of that process with the strategic planning. So TRS has been highly effective with its strategic planning and actually getting things done. Page 4, I just want to talk a little bit about, in my opinion, why TRS has been so effective. And again, this board and staff will be planning as a process, not an event or not a point-in-time document. I think that's really critical. The process, in my mind, is far more important than the document. The fact that you all get together regularly and discuss this as a board, the fact that it's embedded in the process for evaluating the executive director's performance and the staff's performance, it's really part of the culture. The framework's pretty straightforward too. It's, where are we now, where do we want to be, how do we get there? And kind of that third leg of the question, I think, is TRS has not been constrained with the status quo of the current situation. And what I mean by that is, analogy I heard is broken leg planning. If Olympic athletes training for the Olympics in 4 years, they break their leg on the treadmill, and they're setting goals for the Olympics in 4 years. They're not going to be planning around having a broken leg. They're going to be planning on that situation being fixed and where they want to be and excel. And TRS has done a good job of that with what capabilities do we need to develop. And we go way back when we didn't even have in-house counsel. Where do we want to be? And it wasn't just this conversation of, well, geez, we don't have in-house counsel, we can't do that. It's like, well, let's get in-house counsel. And look where that's taken the organization as far as a leap ahead, and same with the communication program. So I think that's important. That's one of the things I wanted to say today as far as setting the stage is we want to be realistic, but we don't want to be too constrained with, well, geez, we don't have the staff to do that, or we don't have the space to do that, or whatever, because TRS traditionally has not been subject to that kind of broken leg planning.
Well, and down at the bottom too, we put things like as a wish list type
Yeah.
thing, not important, not urgent, but put it on there, and it will come up on Sean's evaluation, and we can't evaluate him on something that, because of the legislature, because of those things, there was no time for that. So
That's been an interesting part of the process too, is it's still out there, we'd like it to happen at some point, but we're not gonna evaluate him on something that was a wish item, or
Right.
if all these things, I don't know.
Yeah, and frankly, that's where, I mean, a lot of organizations, a lot of state agencies, where they spend their time is in, you know, quadrant 1 and 3 is the stuff that's urgent. You know, and that's not where a board should be spending its time. I mean, we should be spending our time on the things that are important, some of which, like you said, are not urgent. In fact, like, you know, Eisenhower said, a lot of the stuff that's important is seldom urgent. So you look at that, and the fact that we've stayed in the important, I think is huge. And frankly, if you don't focus on things that are important, then they become urgent. You know, if we're not on top of the information systems, or not on top of the security or those types of things, and we have a data breach, all of a sudden, boom, everything's off to the side. All of our plans are off to the side, and we're focusing on that urgent issue. And like you said, Carrie, keeping our eye on the long-term prize. Even some things like in our office, we did, you know, major records, and we're, you know, there's 6 of us, so it's like hard to have long-term planning, but our records management, you know, and if we couldn't find a file, that was a huge deal, and all of a sudden that was urgent. But if you get everybody running around trying to find a file, and you're not taking time to work on the long-term file management system, spending all your time in the urgent, not important. But you spend the time to do the file management system, even though it's not urgent, it's gonna fix everything. You know, it's fixing, you know, is finding one file gonna fix your file management system? No. But is, you know, fixing your file management system gonna help you find one file? Yeah. So it's really important that we've done that. Stakeholder involvement's always been key. I mean, just the makeup of the board, I think, is critical for stakeholder involvement. The fact that you represent members and employers and that type of thing, I think is critical. Stakeholder involvement is kind of inherent just in the board membership. And this board has also reached out, like I said, to SAM, MEAFT, and partnered with MPARA on lots of critical initiatives, so that's good. We define specific outcomes. We'll talk about the commitment worksheet. Again, it's not just these huge pie-in-the-sky goals and objectives. We were working with DPHHS, you know, one of their director's office goals is, you know, every Montanan will be healthy and injury-free. It's like, well, that sounds great, but we're never gonna achieve that goal. And we've got people, you know, out doing rodeo. So to say that, you know, every Montanan's gonna be injury-free, that's not gonna happen with some of the activities we engage in, skiing and rodeoing and those types of things. So we've always had these goals and objectives that are attainable, and we get there, we check them off. And that's great. So accountability and alignment, I've talked about that, and then we actively monitor, and it's really part of our organizational culture, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later too, because one of the things I put both on kind of reporting out on our 2016-2017 plan, and then as we tee up the 2018 plan, I want the board to kind of think about, is there more we should be doing or thinking about as far as acknowledging, rewarding, and communicating our progress. So, you know, the staff has been doing an incredible job of achieving these goals. If there's ways, you know, to reinforce that, we can talk about that, what's meaningful. You know, if you know, somebody's working, you know, 60 hours a week for a couple months to implement an IT system, and well, here's a coffee cup or something. It's like, well, great, thank you. You know, maybe there's some meaningful ways. Maybe it's not always possible to do it monetarily. And then also, I think as far as external stakeholders, our members, people are paying into the system, legislators who are overseeing the system, I mean, communicating to them so they know the good work that we're doing, I think is important too. So I think that's one of the pieces I think we can continue to shore up and increase is how do we acknowledge, reward, and communicate our achievements. So one of the things we want to look at is the 2016-2017 Strategic Planning Commitment Worksheet. I believe it's in your packets. I've got some copies here if anybody needs one.
It's 34 and 35. Yeah, definitely. You guys can
So I'm kind of going to lean on Sean and Tammy a little bit to walk us through and kind of report out on where we're at with this, and this will kind of set the stage, and one of the outputs of today is going to be an updated worksheet for the coming years, so we'll probably be looking at 2017, 2019. But the first thing I want to do is kind of just give the board an update on what we've done and where we've come with some of these existing objectives. So maybe Sean and Tammy, if you want to just jump in a little bit and walk us through some of that.
Sure, so I guess we'll just go through them one by one. The first one there, evaluate organizational capacity to implement GASB requirements, San Francisco growth, and other requirements. Essentially, the GASB 67 and 68 requirements have all been, the staff work in that regard has essentially been done. Originally, that was put on there because we knew there was a lot of work to be done with the GASB in order to be in compliance with it, possibly including us needing to eventually hire like an auditor, an internal, external auditor, type person to go out and audit, be proactive about auditing employer data. Now, up to this point at least, this is the third opinion we've had on our.
Correct.
Yeah, so we've had 3 audit opinions. We've had a clean audit opinion on both 67 and 68 all 3 times. It's not to guarantee that nothing will ever change in this arena, but it seems that we're basically in compliance with the standards at this point. Even without having an auditor for that specific purpose. Now, there may be other reasons we want to have an auditor, certainly. I mean, we've talked about some of those in the past, and we'll probably talk about them again later today. But that is one that maybe could be either marked off as complete, and then the other piece of it, if we're interested in having an audit type of staff person, maybe we incorporate that into a different objective going forward. Is that kind of what you're envisioning, Jim, is to go through?
Yep.
Go through these?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. The next one there is update and maintain a comprehensive disaster recovery plan. TRS has one of those in place. We've reviewed that with the board on a few different occasions. At this point, it's, I think, would be incorporated into our annual review of the TRS board, which sounds like likely will be next August. Or we can, that can vary, but the things that Denise talked to you all about earlier with regard to cybersecurity and boards, fiduciary responsibility, having a comprehensive disaster recovery plan plays into that. So, I mean, we have always done that annually. We'll continue to do that annually. I don't know that it's something that really needs to be listed as a specific objective or anymore, because it's basically standard operating procedure. We need to make sure we keep this up to date. We have it in place. So it could likely be removed.
We didn't have it before, so.
We did, right,
So
and now we
it's
do.
there.
And John updates it quarterly, actually. Develop a plan for video, audio clip information, dissemination, including what information is a priority. That one is not exactly complete. We have, it's not complete. We don't have like I think what we envisioned when we went over this goal last year, this objective last year, was that we would sort of lay out, these are the areas we want to see video clips, where number 1 might be termination of employment, number 2 might be working after retirement, number 3 might be, who's an active member of TRS. We do have a couple of those video clips out there, but we don't have a set plan, right, Darla? We don't have anything like laid out, this is our timeline, or these are the items and this is the timeline. We don't have that currently. I think that's still probably something that we should work to have, so we have a direction to go with. And when I say video clip, what we're talking about there is the storyline software. For those of you that were on the board, remember looking at that. It's kind of an animated, it's more dynamic than just like a PowerPoint. There's some motion, and I mean, they're actually turn out pretty nice if they're done right. So that one's something that we probably need to continue with. The next one there is develop video audio clips. Again, tied to the objective right above that. As we have developed that plan and determined which topics we want a video or audio clip on, then certainly we would develop it. Yep, so those two can probably be incorporated with one another. Develop and deliver a short video for inclusion and induction programs at school. That one's not done, but we have a pretty good idea of what pretty good idea of what we're gonna do there. I recently went to the directors only meeting and it just happened that Minnesota TRS just had done one of these, and it's actually really well done and kind of covers in 4 minutes. It basically covers the kind of thing you'd want them to go over at an induction program. So I think those three seems like makes sense to me. Could be, you know, sort of combined, and Jim has has a kind of a draft of a new commitment worksheet, but this is, right now, we're just giving the updates of where we're at with the old one.
Darla, I volunteer to show it at our induction program, because I do run that, so I need somebody to do it.
Yeah, that would be great. The next one there is develop and post an interactive post-retirement checklist. Work has been ongoing, I guess, is the best way to put on that. I mean, I think Emma actually started working on it, then Karen took it a little bit further, and Darla, unfortunately, you know, hasn't had time really to devote to it yet, because you have to remember with Darla's, when we hired Darla, Darla's basically half-time at least on the project still, and only really half-time to do what we used to have a full-time person to do. Now, once the project's over, that will change, obviously, so the work she does do is amazing. It's just a matter of, we have her stretched pretty thin.
It's just time management, she's.
Time management. So.
Two of you.
So I think we, you know, like I said, I guess you would say that one's still ongoing, and we'll get there eventually. Develop long-term plan to improve workplace efficiency. As you know, that's underway. We'll talk about that in more detail, I guess, here later today. Update the TRS succession plan and progression criteria. So the progression criteria has been updated, so that is done. As far as the remaining succession plan goes, you know, I think we sort of deal with that as we know things are coming up now. I don't know that it has to be a specific goal or strategy. Like an example would be, we knew Carla was planning to retire, so we double filled her position with her replacement, which is Natalie, for a few months, and had them sort of give Natalie the opportunity to work on that work while Carla was still here to give her some guidance. I mean, I think we have a pretty, you know, straightforward.
I think some of that discussion was also the cross-training kinds of things that happen with people when there isn't succession going on.
Right, yeah. And we've always tried to do that throughout an employee's career. I mean, we've grown a lot since I started here. We've more than doubled in size. And in the past, you had to be cross-trained. Now, people are getting more focused on a particular section within TRS. But we are still trying to, that's part of the succession planning. We actually had Natalie learning a lot of Carla's responsibilities years ago. I mean, not in as fine detail as she did in probably the last month and a half before Carla retired, but you know, she was processing monthly payroll, which was something Carla did in and of just by herself. And so, yeah, I mean, we still have that. We will still continue to do that and try to, you know, encourage individuals. I mean, we have in the accounting staff, trying to encourage, like, you know, not that I can say that, you know, like Kim understanding what Joyce is doing and things along those lines, so they can back each other up. And we still have to have that in the event of vacations and stuff like that. So, but, you know, that was part of the succession plan that we had in place is, you know, would we hire externally? Would we try to promote for this particular position internally, or what will we do? And how are we going to accomplish that? And we defined that, you know, years ago whenever we set up this succession plan initially. So, like for, you know, IT positions, my position, Sean's position, it would be an external recruitment, but try to recruit internally for other positions. Say, for instance, like I, you know, said, Carla was, we knew she was retiring. We started promoting, encouraging Natalie to learn her position early on. So, yeah.
And that did come to it. That came to us when we were thinking, what's going to happen when Dave leaves?
Right.
You know, what are we going to do?
Right.
And what is the progress? And
Yeah.
so that
Yeah, and I guess I don't have any problem having some component of this remain. I guess just know that it's essentially complete at this point and will be ongoing. I mean, the
Yeah.
succession planning part of it's gonna be something that we always are doing.
Well, and I think that's like the disaster plan. I think
Yeah.
once it's become policy and practice and all of that,
Yeah.
then I don't think it needs to be on a strategic planning. I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, the next one there was develop legislative information webpage. We did do that, and we've done it the last couple of legislative sessions, so that one was completed. Of course, we'll have to develop another one when we get into the next legislative session.
Did you get, do you know, how well used people,
How well what?
people look at it?
No, I don't know, did we run any statistics on that page?
We had to remove all those analytics, so.
Oh, we
I
did,
guess
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we, for a while, we were using, what was it, Google Analytics? We were using Google Analytics, so we could kind of tell, how much traffic each page was getting, but then it has to do with them identifying kind of where you're at and all that.
It was against state policy, as it
Oh,
turns
yeah,
out.
it was. It ended up being against
Oh.
state policy, so we recently removed it. Yeah, I don't know what to guess there. I think just based on phone calls I would get, because if someone called and they had a question about legislation, they would transfer to me, and I'm not saying we had a ton of those calls, but the phone calls I do get on that, it seemed like they had seen what was on our website, and they were wondering which bills sort of affect TRS, but.
Sean, I have a question. Was the intended audience for that different than the members?
It's both members and employers. I would say, both active, retired members and your employers and other
So why couldn't it
stakeholders.
just be included on the M-Trust? Why did it have to be a separate webpage? Why couldn't it just be added to?
Well, it's also useful for our partners,
Media or legislators? or
media
us,
in
or-
particular.
School board members.
School board, other administrative organizations.
So
For example,
Exactly.
Yeah.
typically, when we're going through the legislative process, we're pretty much hand in hand with most of those organizations. They
Sure.
understand where we're at. But in one of those issues, maybe where we're not, it gives them a heads up that this is kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, makes sense.
It was also useful for staff as well, just to
Yeah.
have that access to
Just a
see.
general
In general
communication.
communication, they could go out and look and see what, what's happening with the legislative session, what's going on that affects TRS. And so, because we have certain access to actually go out and look at, the bills and stuff like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Some of those pages, and that's a classic one right there, people will fill the void if you don't have something for them to look at. So they think they understand what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And that's one where you don't want them to fill
They
the
still
void.
do.
They still do. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so next one there was develop school board webpage. That one, we haven't done anything specific to that goal yet. New member training materials intended to promote the value of TRS DD plan to new members of the system. We do have some material out there on this, such as a flyer, and there's some web content available already, but that induction video, kind of welcome to TRS video that we've sort of seen a nice example of, will, I think, sort of add to our content in this area, so I'd say this one still is ongoing.
Sean,
Yes.
question about that. Is that potentially would that potentially be included under develop a plan for video audio clip information? Wouldn't that be a specific video audio clip to that purpose? Or could it be? Or would
Yes,
it be,
it's
are you talking about hard copy materials?
No, I think they're interrelated. It certainly could be that, part of our plan is to have a video for new members that kind of promotes the value of TRS, that would check a box up there as well as the box down here, or, help fill this box down here.
Okay.
The next one there is promote third leg of retirement, so like a deferred comp plan, 401k plan, other available savings, like Roth IRA for TRS members. That is one that we haven't done anything with it yet. Certainly can be done, it's just one of those things we haven't haven't devoted the resources to it at this point, certainly can though. And it's important, I think, for people to understand that, you know, you have TRS, if you're working in Montana, for all but a couple of our employers, you're gonna have Social Security, but you should also probably have the third leg of the stool, which would be something else.
And I envision something fairly generic there. Just explaining the realities of retirement. And you guys probably see it all the time, just an initial financial planning, a few thoughts to throw out there.
Are any of your employers making 457 plans available?
Some do.
Some have a state plan, I think.
Yeah.
Don't they? Yeah, I don't know that anybody has a 401k, it'd be a 403b.
403B,
Yeah.
ours are 403Bs, yeah.
Let's see, the last one there from our old plan is develop and expand staff competency and expertise through on-the-job training, continuing education, and certification. I guess that's always gonna be ongoing. We do have the tuition reimbursement program that the board has adopted, that's available to staff. Occasionally, staff will come to us wanting to attend one of the professional development courses, or we may go to staff if we see one that we think a specific individual should attend, and we'll send them to that over at the PDC. As far as certification goes, I think Tammy, previously, the executive staff looked at, you know, whether we should have, like, our benefit officers all get certified, and I think it was decided that we weren't really getting a lot of bang for the buck there.
Yeah, benefit analysis, it wasn't, you know, wouldn't be worthwhile to spend the money to get them certified. So, yeah. That decision a long time ago.
Quite a while ago, yeah.
Well, there's definitely some ongoing
There's
ones that we can
definitely
get
opportunity,
off
yeah.
of here.
And even, you know, with the staff competency and expanding, I mean, I know the personnel committee talked at the last meeting about some of the work we're doing with salaries and market progression and those types of things, and I think that certainly ties right into that objective. So as we carry that one forward, we might change the complexion of it a little bit. And so, like you said, Carrie, and thank you, Sean, for doing that. Clearly, we're gonna have some objectives that seem to carry forward. We'll spend some time this morning or this afternoon talking about those and prioritizing those. A lot of them have to do with, you know, some of the outreach and communication efforts, and I'm always very conscientious about committing other people to work, especially when they're sitting directly behind me. So we could talk about, you know, prioritization. Obviously, it's not all gonna get done right away, so what is our top priorities there? We'll talk about some of the ones that carry forward, and I think some of the things that both Sean and Carrie touched on that seem to move into the next plan we've captured on the draft worksheet. Sean, do we want to circle back just briefly and talk about, you mentioned with the GASB, maybe getting an audit person, is that something we see in the near horizon that we want to talk about now, or do you see that further down the road, kind of see how things are going, and maybe get the board's thoughts on that piece, because I didn't necessarily put something in the worksheet for that.
I don't think it's probably not the next 12 months type
Okay.
of discussion, I don't think. I mean, we haven't received the audit like, when I say audit pressure, I mean the legislative audit division. At one point when that first hit this worksheet, I think we were contemplating that we would get pressure from them, that we need to show that we're doing more in the way of actual auditing employer, like going out, sitting down, looking, or have the employer send us all their payroll records to make sure that the right people are being reported in the right system. We haven't really got pressure there. There are other facets of TRS though, where if we were to catch those reporting errors earlier on in people's career, it would certainly help us as well as our members. But I mean, what level of staff do you need to throw at that to make any kind of real difference when you're talking about 360 employers?
Right. And is that something the board sees as, you know, do we want to get ahead of that? Do we just want to kind of see how things go? And I think we're talking that, you know, a substantial cost to the system. I mean, to hire an internal auditor and benefits and everything there. Are you thinking like one FT or more than one?
Well, I think you can certainly, you could keep one busy for sure. I mean, what doing just I mean, you could keep probably several people doing external audits busy year round for many years. I mean, I don't think we want to go to that level.
Right.
It would likely be, if anything, right now, it would be nice to have someone that could devote a little bit of their time to internal auditing, making sure that we're doing what we say we're doing, following our own internal controls, and then a bigger chunk of their time doing external auditing. But are we ready for that right now? No, we may be though in the next 18 months. to 2
Okay.
years.
Well, we might not be to that specific thing, but maybe our goal needs to be something like how we're gonna move in that direction. Certainly some of the things that tie to that could be development of a tool that enables our employees to do a self-evaluation of where they're at with what our expectations are. Some of that kind of stuff might be something, might be some initial small steps that you could take to make sure that happens, and it wouldn't be something necessarily that you would ask them to do on an every year basis at all, but it might be that, you know, maybe expect every 5 years, we're gonna ask you to look at what you're doing and just report back what you find. And it's not us necessarily auditing, it's, you know.
Yeah, the employers.
Yeah.
John, what would the external audit include? I mean, do you just look at a job classification description to see if they're properly placed, or
Yeah, I
is there
mean,
more data that you need?
That's part of the challenge is if you just go off position title, which is typically the only thing that may be in the employer's HR system, different places call different, you know, there's not really uniform job titles, number one. So any person that we had that we were gonna send out to do that kind of work would have to be fairly schooled up on what duties are reportable to TRS, what does the educational services capacity mean? And they would have to, any of the ones that aren't just really black and white, like a teacher, you know, a science teacher, we know that's TRS reportable, but if it's some sort of a different, you know, workforce training kind of thing, you know, if it's a different type of position where they really have to dig into it, that person would need to have the knowledge base, or at least the knowledge base to identify this one's a question mark, send it to me, or send it to Denise, or send it to Tammy, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest piece would be looking at current employees, where they report, that they're reported to the right system, and then, you know, some additional verification that you're really reporting their full gross compensation, you're not excluding some piece for administrators that's getting paid into a 403B plan or something like that. There's a lot to it that you could utilize this person
So
for.
it'd be well beyond just, say, having the best you can do list of job names, and if something doesn't fit into that, then those are the ones you check, but clearly it's more than that.
Yeah, sometimes they'll have a pretty, what seems like a clear title, there should be no question, and they're still in the wrong system.
Currently, the Legislative Audit Division does census data audit, where they go out, they have like 3 tiers of employers, large employers that are audited every year. And then the medium employers are audited like every 5 years on a cycle. And the smaller ones, I think, is every 10 years, but I think they might even have a cutoff where they just say these ones are never, or, you know, they have 1 teacher or something, you know, I don't know.
Do you know what the thresholds are for those categories?
I could find out, I don't off the top of my head, but, you know, like obviously Billings and Missoula and.
It's purely identified by the number of employees?
Yeah, I mean, probably has something to do with either the FTE or the, you know, contributions to the system, you know, something along those lines.
Sean, is it obvious to you that adding that FTE to get those things fixed up front would save more than an FTE of aggregate time that people waste trying to fix those things on the back end? I mean, is it such a big problem that that's just obvious?
I don't know if I could really quantify exactly how much time this person would eliminate for staff work internal, but I can tell you just the interest cost for our employers and our members, if it's a reporting issue that goes back any length of time at 7.75%. I mean, you could pay several people's salaries just with what we're
Yeah, I mean, I think the cumulative time between our staff and PERS's staff to correct people that are reported to the respective system
significant,
incorrectly is.
Well, and I see,
it's
and I see
sometimes-
part of this goal being tied to if we ever can
Yeah,
be in a little bit closer relationship with them to do a joint kind of effort. I
Yeah.
mean, that's all
Yeah.
part of this too.
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
they actually have an audit staff, PERS, but.
So
Yeah.
if it's clear that you have the need already, because you seem to be in consensus about
Yeah.
that, what is the 18-month time frame have to accomplish for you to be ready for that position?
Nothing really other than if we had the position right now, I'm not sure where we'd put them.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
physically?
that's part,
Yeah.
that, that needs to be part of this discussion.
Yeah, it is, I mean, we'll get to that. I mean, right now,
We can't hire anybody else.
we really don't have the space.
I see.
But, you know, Scott brings up a good point about, you know, Impera does have at least one external auditor that goes out. You know, there may be some opportunity to, you know, either add to that, you know, so that we have more, so maybe we have one, they have one, or we have half of one, they have 1.5. I mean, there may be some,
Yeah, there might be
some
some
opportunity
sharing.
to at least share what we're trying to get out of it, because it's in their best interest that people are reported to the right system too, because they have a staff member equivalent to our staff member that works on these reported and error issues, and there's nothing fast about those. They all take a lot of time, a lot of effort. There's, you know, significant staff time costs. There's always gonna be some employer and employee costs associated with those. So yeah, to the extent we can eliminate those errors up front, that's way better. And we'll never get to 100%, you know, but we'll get maybe a lot better.
And the people who are affected, it's
Yeah, it's
horrible
awful.
for them.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
horrible.
yeah, the benefit in preventing that is huge.
Right.
You know, if that auditor focuses really just on school districts, because they have, you know, all kinds of other entities in PERS.
Their auditor does both school districts, they do community colleges, I think they also do some of the counties. You know, so yeah, they're not just specific.
So that's why the 1.5 thing would make more sense.
Yeah, maybe.
Because they spend a lot, I would assume a lot of their time on systems other than those associated with what TRS would be, or confused with.
Yeah.
Because you're sure not gonna be confused by the placement of in the sheriff's
Yeah,
system.
Right.
there's definitely a lot of benefit in a joint effort for them as well as us. You know, that could relieve some issues on their end, just with that staff.
It could, and even if it's just, you know, we end up eventually hiring our own auditor at TRS, but having two auditors, one from each system, then maybe, you know, we have some training with both of them so that Impera auditor has a better idea of exactly some of the things that this auditor is looking for from TRS, and the same, you know, vice versa.
That, and I would hope that they would coordinate where they're going.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
together.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
and
share-
and we have a
obviously
good
we're sharing the
relationship
data.
with Impera to where I like the scheduling and the sharing, and that stuff is all on the table. I think we can probably accomplish a lot of those things.
And the one thing that we have that's a little bit different than PERS is we actually have a position that strictly is dealing with those dormant or inactive accounts and the reported in errors, where I believe Impera, they're using their benefit analyst, which is not the same scope as a benefit officer here at Teachers Retirement System to handle those reported in errors, and which I think is some of the frustration of some of the time consuming or the time that it takes to get these reconciled between the two systems, because, you know, their primary focus is on getting people retired and quoting benefits and things along those lines, or we actually have someone here internally that's one of their primary responsibilities, handling those reported in errors or those inactive accounts and dormant accounts, whereas our benefit officers are, you know, focus on, you know, retiring folks.
And that's an issue you have to keep in mind as far as staffing as well, is that initially an auditor is going to make a lot more internal work, because, they find the problems, and then you have to have the internal staff to fix the problems too.
You may get busy again.
Yeah, well, we've addressed some fairly large groups of misplaced
Yeah.
employees, and it's, you know, it takes a year to get everybody moved to where they're supposed to be. That's
Because you're dealing with that other outside entity, who's responsible for what interest and who made the mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Well, and sometimes
Outside of what you do.
Right,
Yeah.
you're waiting as well on records from employers, because, I mean, in some case, I don't wanna get too far in the weeds, but, you know, we don't just rely on what was reported to Impera for service credit purposes, especially if it's like reported in error to PERS and they need to come to TRS, like a lot of the paraprofessionals were. So we gathered the information, the actual payroll records from the employers, so we can make sure we're assigning the correct service credit, all that. And so, I mean, that just is all time consuming, because they gotta go dig through in some cases, they gotta go dig through boxes from 1985, you know, to get us the records.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
You're absolutely
the
right.
work we can do on the front end to reduce the number of instances where people are reported the wrong system certainly would be well worth it.
Theoretically, over time, the time required to do that would be reduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, in theory, yeah.
The audit function would act as an additional impetus for employers to do working retirees correctly from the beginning as well. If there's, you know, more of a chance that, I don't use any names, but that those cases are going to be found, maybe it won't happen.
Well, and there certainly will be, I'm sure, priority kinds of data that auditor is going to be looking at, which would include the problem areas that we've had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we can just, you know, make all school district employees be reported to the teacher's retirement system and the problem solved. Exactly. Legislative.
Yeah.
So in addition to the, you know, the additional work, longer term that Denise is talking about, just standing up a program like this, I mean, it's gonna hit, you know, management, you know, Sean, Tammy, Nolan, there's gonna have to be legal review of the program and procedures before they even go out. There's gonna have to be, you know, an IT component if they're taking a laptop out and getting data, security, and certainly we're gonna have to communicate it to employers that were coming out, so there's gonna have to be a kind of a long-term planning effort, I think, all the indirect impacts beyond just hiring somebody and having somewhere for them to work. So it sounds to me like we should at least get an objective on there about developing, you know, internal and external audit capacity, and maybe over the next year, at least working out that plan, and figuring out all that stuff and giving everybody a chance to say, okay, what's the impact's gonna be, you know, develop a true fiscal note or whatever we wanna call it, for the process, and then bring it back. So we'll add that on there. Okay, so we talked a little bit about, you know, the objectives are complete, the objectives that remain, we're gonna be making some changes to the plan. And like I said, I think maybe we can collapse this into one discussion, but both with the completion of the 2016, 2017, and the 2018 stuff, I wanna spend some time maybe after lunch talking about what the board's plan is to recognize, acknowledge, and reward attainment of objectives. So I realize I've said that 4 times now, but I wanna keep it on our radar, because I think that's really important. So maybe before we break for lunch, we'll come back and we'll after lunch establish, I'll hand out the worksheet for the coming year. We'll, for example, add what we just talked about as far as the developing the audit capacity. We've got some other of the things that carried forward from last year's worksheet already on there, and then anything else that the board wants to see as goals and objectives. And again, we can even look back to previous board discussion. I know there was some discussion last time about staff competency and retention and everything. We talked about the pay stuff, so we'll talk about some of those types of things. But before we break for lunch, I just want to take a few minutes and kind of refresh, or at least think about the SWOT analysis again. So we did, like I said, we did an initial one in 2009. We refreshed it again in 2014. I don't necessarily know there's going to be a lot of huge changes or additions that need to be made, but I think before we get into goal and objective setting for the coming 2 years, it's not a bad idea to at least just take some time and look at our landscape and see what we have. Did I send enough around? So again, I don't want to belabor this. So when we look at things like, you know, strengths and weaknesses, typically those are the things we're looking at internally, and then opportunities and threats are typically the things we look at externally. And also there's gonna be things that are gonna show up on multiple lists. We can have something that's both a strength and a weakness, or an opportunity and a threat. You look at something like current tax reform. I mean, that could be an opportunity, it could be a threat. There's been certainly changes at the federal level in the administration and how certain things are viewed. I heard you folks talking about like the Pew Foundation and some of those types of things that are swirling around out there that we need to be cognizant of. And even just the discussion earlier about the cost of the system of having people into the wrong system and interest in those types of things. Those are all types of threats. So this will just be an open discussion. I want to give you a chance to kind of read it over. Let's talk about strengths first. So maybe let's just take a minute and kind of scan through what we've come up with in the past and see if there's anything that we just need to get rid of, or that we think is significant and no longer on here. And some of the things like, you know, the 25-year retirement, I mean, it's no longer available, but it's still kind of a component of the system for some people, so we left it on there. You know, the Board of Investments was identified as a strength, the different retirement systems. So again, just want to give you an opportunity to kind of look at the strengths. They're all contained on page 1 there, and see if anybody has any comments on anything that should either be stricken or that should be added as far as our strengths.
So information system, it says still references Pension Plus, and so we should update that one to be something related to M-Trust. I mean, M-Trust is the new platform.
Okay.
And, yeah.
And just saying how, you know, how this new system has been such a positive help for staff and positive benefit to our staff and our members.
Right, we've gained some efficiencies already, and then we have several things we're gonna talk about later today that are, you know, related, that are, M-Trust is gonna help make it possible to gain more efficiencies out, you know.
Do you see any other things that you would call a strength to the board or to the system itself? I think you have a very comprehensive list here.
Yeah.
You've thought of staff and board and.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. So let's take a.
One thing though, we've got training for the NCTR, training for board members, but we also send staff for training.
Okay.
And I didn't notice that mentioned in place, but I do think that that's important.
Absolutely. And is it more than just NCTR? Is there other?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
NAPA, GFOA, PRISM.
Yeah.
P2M2, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the P2?
P2F2.
Okay.
Sounds like a World War II fighter jet.
I was thinking
So
it's
much more
Roy
boring.
from Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's actually a big group of accountants, so really boring. No, it's actually really good.
All right, let's look at weaknesses.
I think Pension Plus can come off now.
Yep.
We're no longer retired, or we're no longer.
Should there be a line item for limitations on the current physical space?
How many key, it says several key people could retire. What's the status after, we've had a number of retirements in last year. Is that still?
Still somewhat relevant, you have.
There's a group of us that are eligible to retire.
I'm curious, because I just know we've had.
Yeah.
But I can't because I don't have Jim's plan.
Trust me, I spent some time this summer looking at my account.
Yeah.
So we've had just to not make the retirement plan too generous.
Yeah. I think for the next year, we would say we're relatively stable, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But this is longer than 1 year.
Yeah,
as far
right,
as
right.
it goes on the sheet. so I was just curious.
So a handful, like 3 or 4 people?
I'm trying to think, there's only probably,
Sandy,
okay,
myself,
yeah.
Denise, I mean, you're.
She won't be retiring.
But yeah, I mean, we've got a group of
So,
people that
yeah,
are on
3 or
that.
4.
Kim,
It could, I mean,
Yeah.
that are,
yeah.
But yeah, I was just curious if that was still an ever-present danger.
Just put some brochures out for like new boats and, you
Yeah.
know, cabins and stuff, so you financially can't.
Yeah.
You'd sort of have to, I think, contemplate how difficult those positions would be to fill and the, you know, the key quality of their,
Right.
I mean, Tammy is the, you know, the primary one who's eligible that,
Yeah.
and she's not allowed to retire.
Institutional knowledge is necessary for her to remain.
Yeah, and that circles back to kind of that succession planning too.
Right.
It's, and there's, you know, the expected retirements, but also if somebody's eligible and something comes up in their life we can't
Right.
expect. I mean, somebody may end up retiring sooner than even they expected. I think we've done some work to address some of these weaknesses, you know, the benefits and programs being undervalued by legislatures, even just that map you have on the website showing the economic impact of TRS. I think you've done a lot of work to address some of these weaknesses.
I'm going to throw one out. I've mentioned this to Sean before, but I think it's important to say it to the board as well. When I first started working here, we were an even small, not a lot smaller, but we were, some people did very many things that I think we may have, I'm gonna just say it flat out. I think Sean spends, the way we're structured, he has to spend too much time doing actual work, calculating and verifying benefits. Actual, no, I don't.
How did you start this? I'm just gonna lay it out.
It's too hard.
I'm saying I think we're coming to a point, both with respect to the things we have to comply with now and that sort of thing, where, you know, the Dave Sen model of he was very much a cog in the production wheel, as well as our primary administrator, might be, I don't know, I guess I'll let Sean weigh in on that as well, but
it's getting closer. I mean, Tammy and I've had some conversations about areas of potential need that we could, you know, alleviate some of that pressure. Well, yeah. So it's not like we haven't thought
It's
about
hard.
it. Denise has mentioned it before to me.
It's hard to be a good chief executive if you're dealing with too much time in the minutia.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
It's hard to be.
Well, part of that be alleviated when trust is completely done, no? That's 50% of your time or more, isn't it? More.
Well, it's
Yeah.
about
More than that.
90% of Tammy's time.
90%.
Yeah, most, I mean, for all intents and purposes, it is at this point.
Yeah.
It may be, I mean, you know, some of these other items that we have identified going into this, I think are gonna be fairly significant IT and operations undertakings where you kind of have to have a business analyst